Welcome to The Beat. I am Ari Melber, and we have a lot for you tonight. We begin with the top story. President Trump has reached a record before the 100 days, and it is a record of complete measurable failure. Many of his own advisors and Wall Street allies view it as humiliating. It is something that will not only affect so many people in our country and around the world, but even if you look at it by narrow terms of just the president's record in history, this is now the blemish on his record, not only for the second term, but forever. The record is the self-inflicted choice to wipe out this much value in the stock market over just 2 days. We've been reporting how people are holding onto their hats during this tariff-inflicted meltdown over the last day. Well, tonight, as we end the week and have a whole nother day of markets, the U.S. stock market has now lost $6.4 trillion in just 2 days. This is Trump's trade war. We are losing because of Trump, because of the choices he's made. The market's tanking, recession fears deepening, and of course, it's the economy stupid. This is not something the Republican Party will be able to lie out of, or to pardon their way out of, or to trick people into thinking that all of the problems they have, from rising prices to job fears to rising costs, that they're not real or they're somebody else's fault. We're also seeing the fear of an anti-Trump, anti-MAGA political backlash as people start to see this candidate who promised to focus on your concerns in the economy has actually, according to many, sold out the American worker.
Markets look set to sell off as Donald Trump imposes the steepest U.S. import levies in a century.
Stocks set to wipe out nearly $2 trillion in market value.
Taking a plunge as investors react to the sweeping tariffs.
Right now, angry heads are prevailing, and right now, circumstances are prevailing that send stock prices much lower than where they are right now.
I struggle for what the president's game plan is. Because if you wanted to make the market crash, I think you would go with this game plan.
I haven't seen it yet. I guess it's close to panic.
This is the biggest policy mistake in 95 years.
95 years, and we can show you the top 500 companies. These are the largest companies that trade, and whether you trade in the stock market or not, as I've told you, this will affect you because these type of losses come with consequences. And eventually job cuts, and of course the price and inflation issues. This is down another 6% today. Another market index you heard of, the Dow, shed over 5%. The NASDAQ, another big bucket of stocks, losing just about 6%. This is what they call an official bear market, where you are down a fifth from the peak. Trillions gone. The Fed now warning Trump's tariffs will juice inflation. Remember, that was the big issue, the high prices that helped him over the understandable concern with inflation and the way people blamed then President Biden. Well, Donald Trump's serving up more inflation. That's according to the Fed, which is the independent arm of monetary policy for the federal government, and of course, the risk of recession or slower growth. One of the top banks, JP Morgan, says we have tipped over to a recession now being more likely than not, 60%. That is, based on all the modules they have, it is more likely than not that Trump's choice to do these tariffs will give us a recession that otherwise was less likely. Indeed, before Trump came into office, though, same banks were putting the recession fears much lower, like 20%. The Financial Times, which is sort of the British version of the Wall Street Journal as a Bible for the market, says this is an astonishing act of self-harm by Donald Trump. Then their counterpart that I mentioned in the U.S., Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal, quote, someone should sue to block his abuse of power. The Journal, now suddenly concerned about Trump lawlessness, something they have often minimized on other topics. China is hitting back, and boy, do they have the resources and the runway to do it. They're matching the whopping 30% tariff. Economics can be complicated, but this part is simple. I will tell you, America, if I can speak directly with you, you will be paying that tariff. That's exactly how it works, which is exactly why so many people, apart from our divided political times and partisan lenses, so many people, from nonpartisan experts to liberals who warned against this, to Republicans who privately warned against this, although they didn't use any power to try to stop Trump, to Wall Street experts, to, of course, economists explain, a third a third, 34% spike, and you're going to pay it because that's what Donald Trump decided for you. Welcome to Donald Trump's America and his economics. Now, on the politics side, Republicans, late, quietly, with a shuffle step, are starting to see how this could doom their party for even more than one election. Tariffs are upsetting the entire world economy. There's political peril for the party that brought them, and take one of the Republicans who for years has backed Donald Trump ever since they made a power pact when Trump became president the first time, but now a new tune from Ted Cruz.
If the result is our trading partners jack up their tariffs and we have high tariffs everywhere, I think that is a bad outcome for America. Tariffs are a tax on consumers, and I'm not a fan of jacking up taxes on American consumers. So my hope is these tariffs are short-lived.
Hope all you want. We are in deep. We've lost trillions. Even if Donald Trump can see the failure, can hear the markets and the television coverage and the press coverage savagely noting the savage pain that he's brought to the United States, to consumers, to workers, as well as the rest of the world, that doesn't mean he has known to adjust after going this big and this deep. Other conservatives now admitting the problem.
I'm not going to bubble wrap it. What's happening is not good.
The same people that voted for you to play by the rules, put away money for taxes, put money away for retirement, are really feeling the brunt of collateral damage of this.
Look, I hate tariffs. I think they're stupid. I think they're backwards. I don't think that they help the American economy. The president has a different opinion.
I'm certainly concerned about what's happening right now in the markets, and I hope the administration is looking at that as well.
It's hard to find a Republican who's willing to do an interview and wants to defend this stuff, which tells you the free fall. Remember, there's been a lot of talk about the trade war and a lot of bluster and some stops and starts, which we covered, but this is now the red hot core of it. These are these first 2 days when it hit this level with these global tariffs and the pain. And in these 2 days, Republicans starting to admit they have a Trump problem. Many of the people you just saw on your screen, they cater to a base that likes Donald Trump and identifies as MAGA, but there are even limits there because they can see that they could lose their jobs, their perch, their audience, in the case of some of those commentators, because people are paying this pain. When I show you bear market 20% crash territory, after that will come the firings and the job losses. Now, most of the elected Republicans, though, are not yet even trying to use the power they actually have. They can do interviews, but they actually have power in Congress. There's been this push for a Senate bill that would better control and limit Donald Trump's tariff instincts. Most Republicans haven't supported that. A handful did. Meanwhile, business owners are feeling it.
Experts predict prices across the board, including appliances, clothing, groceries, and cars, are expected to go up.
I'm a little afraid that the price will be going up, which means a higher car payment with me. And I have 2 little kids, so that's going to be a little hard for me too.
As a small business, we can't absorb that kind of increase in product. So we're having to reprice.
In one word, how you're feeling about what's happening in the stock market right now?
Anxious? Yeah. I mean, it's not too clear what's going to happen.
Terrified.
Why terrified?
Vulnerable people were always unsafe, and now they're made even more vulnerable.
And that's just a couple days in. There's also resistance. Protesters against the Trump-Musk agenda, as well as this economic pain, say that they have, and you can see the bullets here from this group, Hands Off, they have now confirmed protests, often more than one, in every state in the country this weekend. So the chaos is real. The pain is real. And Donald Trump basically walked off the job. Think about this level of economic calamity. When COVID hit and you had the crash, it was everyone's focus. If you go back to another crash that was not caused by U.S. policy or a president saying he didn't care, but rather the sort of complex real estate bubble that burst in 2008, well, everybody was on the job, and Bush was convening meetings with the leaders of the economy, the banks that were so at fault for some of it, and the congressional leadership to figure out every single thing that could be on the table that they could act with all deliberate emergency speed. This is a president who claims emergency powers and wartime powers when there isn't a war, and then walks off the job right now today when we're in this emergency shedding $6 trillion. He went to Mar-a-Lago. He's scheduled to do a weekend golf tour. So he left work early for that, left the White House, wasn't physically on site to deal with any of the type of meetings I mentioned that Bush did, or talk to people in Congress, or anything to even try to quiet the markets and show leadership. He's driving around his golf cart and also making money because it's his private business that's hosting the Saudi event. Markets may burn, but he's counting up his own money. Just as I told you, he took a lot of crypto money and thought, oh, as long as he's doing okay, forget everyone else. If he lost $6 trillion, which he doesn't have, I think we would hear a very different tune, and he might even have time to go to work instead of ride around the cart. Now, how is this playing out in MAGA land? I showed you the leadership. We heard from Republicans who are running away, but you got to understand, one of the great political strengths of Donald Trump is the overestimation of his support. I'm sure you watch the news if you're hearing me, and there's been many, many reports and examples of folks who stand by him no matter what, or reverse themselves for him, or come back to him even after doubts. But then you also have to remember, he got fewer votes in 16. He got fewer votes in 20. He blew the midterms in 18. He remains one of the most polarizing and unpopular figures, and then even the base that he does have doesn't stand by him for everything, and certainly not something like this. We began by showing you some of those Republicans who are worried about how many of their supporters, even in red districts, are upset at this self-inflicted economic calamity. I'm going to show you one example of a kind of a sort of podcast digital leader. We heard all about those podcasts, who is a huge Trumpy, Dave Portnoy. He has millions of followers. But with all respect for real to how this new generation talks online, a lot of them don't just say what they're supposed to say or do partisanship. So everyone knows he's MAGA, but he was quite candid about how he felt, and he's quite successful about how much money he's losing and how he opposes and can't even make sense of what Donald Trump is doing to his pocketbook and to many of his listeners' pocketbooks who have a lot less money than him. Take a look.
And it's Tariff City. Trump has put his tariffs all over the place. I've been trying to understand them. I don't. And everything's in the because of it. How much you down right now and today? 7 million. I'm down $7 million in stocks and crypto.
That's what it sounds like when your leader lies, ignores all advice, starts an economic global calamity, and costs you a ton of money. Now, we have a special guest you might recognize from the Obama era, former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Jared Bernstein, when we're back in 90 seconds.
Donald Trump announced sweeping tariffs across the entire globe. Asia, South America, Narnia, Arendelle, Wakanda, Bachelor Nation. Worst day for our economy since COVID. Just a little reminder, this time, he's the disease.
Tariffs went all the way from 54% to 10%, and today so did his approval rating.
Just some of the ways this story has been boiled down, but sometimes you also might need an economist to get into the details, and we have one. President Obama chose Jared Bernstein as his chief White House economist. He also served as chair of the powerful Council of Economic Advisors in the most recent Biden administration. Welcome, Jared.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's great to have you. There are doctors who do preventive medicine, and then there are doctors, of course, who deal with illness. And when they're in demand, it's a bad thing. It's in that realm that we come to you tonight. You're in demand as an expert to deal with this terrible thing. And yet it's something you've studied and understand, especially the intersection between presidents who have certain goals and the actual economic realities. How would you rate the last several days of this trade war for the U.S. worker and consumer?
Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, about minus 1 million. You know, you mentioned something about having some grasp of reality here. I think what the president and his team have done have built a completely alternative reality. And, sometimes that works for them because the propaganda machine is very strong. But when you have a market situation where the losses of the past 2 days have been worse than 99.9% of all other trading, when you have the Wall Street Journal and MSNBC on the same page, when you have Republicans, when you have investors, when you have consumers, when you have businesses all telling you you're wrong, maybe you should listen to them, and we're just not getting that.
We put together what Trump wanted and said would happen to the results. Let's take a look.
With today's action, we are finally going to be able to make America great again. This will be indeed the golden age of America.
Big market sell-off this hour. It is ugly out there. The S&P 500 down 3.7%.
If they complain, if you want your tariff rate to be zero, then you build your product right here in America.
Burning down the house to cook a steak. That's the line.
For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. In many cases, the friend is worse than the foe.
We've seen the anger in the responses from many of those allies, just the shock, the worst case scenarios that were being contemplated.
$6 trillion wiped out here in these 2 days and could get worse. For folks who don't invest in the markets or don't even have much of their own personal retirement savings or are counting on Social Security, which is many people, as you well know, how do these crashes affect them?
Well, the stock market's not the economy, but it's also can be quite influential on the economy. If investors are looking at this kind of a market, they're going to be sitting on their hands, and that means less economic activity. Now, one of the things I think you referenced earlier in your intro was both slower growth and higher prices as a result of these tariffs. Now, that's called decades. Typically, when you have slower growth, you have less inflation, but because of the tariffs, slower growth, higher prices. Now, whether you're in the stock market or not, you've been dealing with prices that have made you unhappy for a long time. And again, as you played in your intro, we know that we're going to see higher prices on so many consumers' goods, appliances, groceries, cars, so on. So this hurts everyone, which again is why it is so vastly unpopular. Every sector, consumers, producers, businesses, and so on. And importantly, the clip you just played, you basically have Donald Trump out there, and I think this is practically a quote from him today, saying everything's fine. Don't believe your lying eyes, believe me. Well, at this point, even he can't pull that off.
Right. What do we look towards in the coming days if he doesn't quickly unwind this, and he's not indicated he would? Does this at some point hit a kind of bottom and then we have a global economy that runs like this short term? Or what do you see as an economist who does some level of forecasting?
Sure. Well, first of all, yes, but I like to forecast, but I don't try to forecast the stock market. That's pretty, that's not something you can do. But here's the thing. Every time Donald Trump raises a tariff, the stock market goes down. If he raises a tariff a little, it goes down a little. If he raises a tariff a lot, like he did on Liberation Day yielded Liquidation Day. We had one Liberation Day and we've had 2 liquidation days. So the extent to which the market reacts is extremely responsive to what he's doing on tariffs. Now, if he gets the message, which is a big if, and at least stops putting more tariffs on, yeah, then I could see the market carving out a bottom, but from a much lower level. You noted the trillions of wealth that's evaporated in a mere couple. Those don't come back when the market bottoms. For those to come back, the market has to go back up. Second, if the scenario that he's created here with the uncertainty, the higher costs, and the slower growth does lead to a recession, and you just played somebody, one of the banks with a 60% recession probability, well, then the problems go much, much deeper. We actually got a pretty decent jobs report today, but that's backward looking. The markets are forward looking.
Right.
So we'll have to watch what happens in days to come.
Yeah. It's really striking, especially coming after a so-called economy referendum for the president that you worked for. And we reported before Election Day, there were people very concerned about prices and inflation. We did special reports on it. It was a real problem. But it was a problem of a certain size. And what we've now seen before even hitting 100 days is Trump dwarfing that problem multifold with the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Murdoch, conservatives, Republicans, everyone saying he made it so much worse. And there we are. Elections have consequences. We're going to be calling on you more, as I said, Jared, because of your great experience and wisdom, but in a bad way, on a tough story that I know is affecting people's lives. So thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Ari.
Absolutely. We've got a lot more coming up tonight, including other big stories beyond the economy. Trump losing another immigration case about those controversial deportation flights, and startling revelations about a 9/11 truther calling the shots in the Trump White House. But coming up next, a story that mixes some of the market concern and the Democrats' response. President Obama stepping up. We'll tell you what he's saying. President Trump has caused all this economic pain with no end in sight, and we have something unusual. President Obama, who doesn't make it his practice to speak out on every controversy in this Trump era, is speaking out now. These were remarks made at a college, and the threats on the campaign trail, which Trump offered that look downright silly right now, another broken promise. But remember, Trump had said he would lower prices, and if he didn't win and Democrats won, then Harris would crash the markets. Instead, we know what we're living through this week. Here is the context.
You want to see a market crash? If we lost this election, I think the market would go down the tubes. We are a nation whose stock market's continued success is contingent on MAGA winning the next election. If Harris wins this election, the result will be a Kamala economic crash, a 1929-style depression. 1929. When I win the election, we will immediately begin a brand new Trump economic boom. It'll be a boom.
And the markets instead are crashing. Here is President Obama.
I think people tend to think democracy, rule of law, independent judiciary, freedom of the press, that's all abstract stuff because it's not affecting the price of eggs. Well, you know what? It's about to affect the price of eggs. It is up to all of us to fix this. It's not going to be because somebody comes and saves you. The most important office in this democracy is the citizen, the ordinary person who says, no, that's not right.
Obama there summoning us all to do whatever part we can. He said that when it comes to this Trump policy and tariffs, it's not going to be good for America. And as for Trump and the complacent Republicans, it's unimaginable. The same parties that are silent now would have tolerated behavior like that from me or many of his predecessors. Vice President Harris also making some rare remarks.
We are seeing those who are capitulating to clearly unconstitutional threats. And these are the things that we are witnessing each day in these last few months in our country.
If you're not used to seeing either of those faces, that's because they have generally stepped back. But we do have a record here. And Kamala Harris, like any other politician, wasn't right about everything. She changed some of her positions. She had an unusually tough assignment coming in later than anyone else in the general election. But there was plenty of policy debate that's legitimate. Then there were things that were so stark, so obvious that she, like many of the Republicans I showed you earlier in tonight's broadcast, were just speaking about established facts in economic orthodoxy, things we know about policy, things we know about the failure of those tariffs that led to the U.S. depression, when Americans in a relatively affluent country were reduced to soup lines and homeless shelters for years. Again, because of failed policy. This is why we know policy and elections matter. And so if you go run the clock back to not that long ago when Trump was threatening doing exactly this, and Wall Street and MAGA and others were minimizing it or basically saying he wouldn't really do it or it was just rhetoric, Kamala Harris spoke from that knowledge base and that history, warning about what exactly would happen this week, what these tariffs could do.
The sales tax of doing a 20% tariffs on all imports that he has described would be a 20% sales tax, in essence, on basic necessities for the average American worker, average American family, totaling almost $4,000 a year. That is no small matter.
It's not small at all. That tariff tax is what she warned in that MSNBC interview with our colleague Stephanie Ruhle in September. And fact check true. She was right about that. Indeed, if you take the $6 trillion loss and the rising prices, it could be even higher, which is why tonight we can report that what Kamala Harris has long said is what Ted Cruz and other Republicans are saying now. This is a tax. You need an off-ramp. Trump is wrong. We can show you the markets under Donald Trump's second term now, this many days in, compared to other presidents in their first 100 days in recent history, including President Obama, who we quoted tonight. Nobody is saying that every president controls every aspect of the economy or the markets, but what you see in the second term, even in contrast to Trump's own first term, in all fairness, is what happens when this completely unbridled individual with no more elections to run and a pure MAGA advisor base that won't tell him no on anything takes control of international economic policy and tanks the economy. We have a lot more coming up tonight, including that immigration loss I mentioned, so stay with us. President Trump has vowed to change the way immigration enforcement works in America, but at some points, he's changing it in ways that are downright erroneous. Take, for example, this new report that the Trump administration even admits they made a mistake and just deported the wrong person, a Maryland father who was legally here, on those now contested flights to El Salvador, which this judge has ruled were likely unlawful. The Trump administration is defending these flights, though, in court. The judge has not yet made a ruling, but did say there is a likelihood that the Trump administration has violated the order that was supposed to limit those flights and may have acted in bad faith. That's just one of several controversies as we look at this wholesale immigration change. And we have a special guest tonight to make sense of it all, the former acting Homeland Security Secretary under President Trump, Chad Wolf, who's also the executive vice president of the America First Policy Institute. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me.
Immigration remains a big issue. What do you see as the main accomplishments or achievements of the administration here about 70 days in? And do you see anything that they could do better, or as they themselves said in that case, that they're doing erroneously?
Yeah, well, look, there's been a lot of action, obviously, taken by the president and his team early in this administration. And so you just have to look at, obviously, the number of border apprehensions have fallen probably to an all-time low. I think over a 94 or 95% improvement over the Biden administration, as well as removals, right, and deportations from the interior of the country. We saw during the Biden administration a lot of removals at the border, but not a lot of removals from the interior in the country, places like New York City, Chicago, Dallas.
On that distinction, what is
two areas I think.
Let me ask you there, and then we'll get in deeper. But what do you see as a distinction there for folks who are, you ran DHS, you had a lot of experience. What are you getting at? Are you saying that the interiors is more important, or that it represents some more assertive strategy?
Well, there's a lot of authority to remove individuals that you pick up right at the border, what we call border returns or pushbacks across that border. And so the Trump administration used that authority. The Biden administration used that authority. But when you really talk about removals, you talk about finding individuals, criminal illegal aliens and others that have been here for some period of time and removing them, those on a final order removal, those are likely, you're going to find those in the interior of the country. And so that's really where you get, the biggest bang for the buck. And we've seen more removals from the interior of the country over these last several months than we had previously.
Okay. Wanted to understand your point there. And let's stipulate that if you target and find people correctly for the right reason, or they have more danger or criminal record and they're inside the country, you could see why that would be an enforcement priority. Then you have what I mentioned, which is deporting the wrong people while also potentially violating due process, according to the judge. We'll see what the appeals show. But this headline, the man sent to El Salvador, do you view that as wrong? And do you think other people who are legally here, whether they're legally here under immigration rules or American citizens themselves, now have to worry about being thrown on a plane without due process?
Well, I don't think so. And again, I would say that I agree with the Trump administration, in which they have said, I believe in a court filing, that it was an error to remove this individual. But I think it's important really to dive into this individual's background. He has a final order of removal. He also has a withholding of removal just specifically to El Salvador. So the error obviously is removing him back to a country that a judge says you can't remove him to. But this individual doesn't have legal permanent status here.
And I'll let you finish.
He has a final order of removal.
I'll let you finish. But
and the government says that he has ties to MS-13.
But that's because of a judge, whether the government likes it or not, finding there could be danger to him. And the American system doesn't just send people back violating against a court order to a place where they might be hurt, right?
But sure, and that same judge back in 2019 also said that he had ties to MS-13, but we also hear a variety of folks saying, well, he doesn't have ties to MS-13. So either you're going to rely on a judge's opinion for all things or you're not. And in this case, again, I would agree with you. It's an error to send him back to that country that he has a withholding of removal to. But again, he has a final order of removal. He has no legal right to remain in the United States under that final order. He just simply should not have been processed back to El Salvador.
Understand the distinction you're making, and then how do you assure others if there are these kind of errors? And as you know, flights took off without what was the apparent due process. What's to stop the government from doing that to other people? And they say, oh, we didn't know it was an American.
Well, again, I don't know that I agree with you about the lack of due process. But again, that's going to be up to the government to say, here are the assurances that we put in place. My guess, since it is being litigated in court, they're going to have to lay that out to that judge and to others to say, here's the process that we go through. And like any process, there are going to be errors from time to time. I'm not saying that that's an excuse or anything, but that's the reality of it. But the question for the government is, how do they minimize those? And then what's the recourse if an error is identified?
Sure. Although I think the whole point of having the system work with the process up front is that error is discovered before someone is in a foreign prison or whatnot. I know your time is... Well, go ahead if you want to respond.
But again, the individuals that we're talking about here are designated terror groups, MS-13, TDA, and others. These are terrorist groups designated by the president, which gives, and again, this is being litigated, but again, gives him wide latitude and authority to remove these individuals out of the country. And I think that's the basis of, obviously, the court case and other things. So yes, I do agree with you. We need to make sure that we are removing the right people to the right place, and that's incumbent on the government to do that. But the latitude and the discretion that the president has is I would say is wide in this case.
All right. And I'm sure we could go in even more depth. I want to get you on other things with your limited time. There was the very controversial treatment of this Tufts University student, Rumeysa Öztürk, Turkish national. The video, I think, has been seen. I'm sure you're familiar with it. You have these federal agents who, in this case, have their identities concealed and are trying to remove her. When you look at that level of tactic, and then you also have a pattern, or perhaps a anecdotal pattern, if I want to be as charitable as possible, where there are allegations that some people might be getting harsher treatment because of their speech, because of the positions they take, which anyone could disagree with, and yet isn't that the whole point of America, including people who are visiting? And so the allegations, and I've got the headlines up here, are that the administration may be going beyond its lawful power, which is quite broad in the immigration area, as I've told viewers, to potentially target people for the stances they take. So my question to you on this rather controversial case is twofold. One, with your expertise, do you view those measures as valid? what we saw in her treatment? And two, would it concern you if there was a pattern of targeting people because of what they said, of what they believe?
Well, let me take maybe the first question first, which is about the tactics. You showed the video of law enforcement
and we
coming
can
up.
put the video up.
I've seen just a small portion of that video. I've seen a small portion of that video. And look, I've heard this when I was at the Department of Homeland Security about the tactics law enforcement uses. They use certain tactics to not only keep the officer safe, but to keep the suspect safe as well. So if they rolled in there with blaring sirens and other things, there are other issues at play here. So when you're doing some undercover work and you want to pick someone up and you try to do that in a safe setting, there are certain tactics they use. From what I can tell in the very limited portion that I've seen from that video, that's what it looks like that they're doing. Now, as far as students being removed here, I think it's important to remember, it's important for your viewers to remember, whether you're here on a student visa or an LPR, these are benefits provided to you by the United States government. You don't have a right to be here. There's no right given to you. And so as you come in and you are a student here on a student visa, there are certain requirements that you have to fit and to adhere to. And if, as the government contends in some of these cases, you either have ties to or that you are promoting a terrorist organization such as Hamas, then the government is saying that's a bridge too far. You don't get to stay here and continue to do that. And
but
so they are removing.
And I know we're running over on time, but and again, as we say in the business, fact check true if there are actual operational ties to one of those groups. But I just want to narrow in before I lose you. The question was, if this is found to be targeting over views, over what I called speech, separate from operational link to those groups, would that concern you as a DHS veteran?
Well, I don't think, again, you need to make sure that you're removing individuals based on facts and reality. And the government is saying that they have evidence, again, maybe not in every case. And again, there's a lot of stuff I would say to viewers is what's being reported on is just the tip of the iceberg, usually with these cases and what the government knows about these individuals and the research and the investigative work that they've done. And so it's incumbent on the government at some point, whether it's in a court or wherever it might be, to say, here's why we're removing you, and we are removing you. So again, I don't accept the premise that they're removing people just based on speech. It's for a variety of circumstances that they're uncovering during their investigations.
Mm-hmm. Well, these are big issues, as you know, including the way the government powers are being used. You've been in this position as acting Homeland Security Chief, Chad Wolf. So we hope to benefit from talking to everyone, and I appreciate you joining us.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Our thanks again to DHS veteran Chad Wolf. I want to mention this headline, that interview airing for the first time just now. We actually sat down and taped the conversation late yesterday. It didn't air on the program last night amidst all that breaking news on tariffs and markets plunging. And this update I want to share on one of those immigration topics is a federal judge ruled late today the administration actually must return that man we mentioned who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. The administration must bring him back to the U.S. Trump officials say they intend to appeal that new loss, just as the DOJ under Trump is challenging other lower court rulings and setbacks about their claims to wartime powers and this wider set of controversial deportations. As I've told you, we will continue to report all of this without fear or favor and invite on people in and out of power who've held these jobs so you can hear everything and make up your own mind. We are going to fit in a break, but next, a 9/11 truther calling the shots in Trump's National Security Council. Here's one way to end the week, a major development that affects your safety and national security, and that has only gotten some attention amidst the economic calamities and tariff crash. I'm talking about a 9/11 truther and conspiracy theorist who has long been busted for pushing propaganda and misinfo, basically, according to reports, calling the shots over who should be top security officials. Sources say that far-right activist and sometime Trump advisor or ally Laura Loomer met with him at the White House and then picked out different generals and national security officials that she opposes for whatever her reasons are. And then, very swiftly, several people who've given most of their public life and career to the military, to public service and national security, fired. 3 National Security Council officials, the head of the National Security Agency, and the deputy there. So just cleaning house because of apparently what she said. And Loomer doesn't dispute this. She posts they've been disloyal to Trump and says she appreciates him being receptive to the materials she gave about them. Here was Trump on the scandal.
Laura Loomer is a very good patriot. She is a very strong person. And I saw her yesterday for a little while. She makes recommendations of names of people. And sometimes I listen to those recommendations.
Adding to the administration, not
adding.
Who did she recommend? Firing?
Well, she'll recommend that too.
A 9/11 truther calling the shots. We'll be right back. Thanks for spending time with us. I wish you a good weekend. And if you want, on Saturday tomorrow, you can always catch The Beat Weekend. We have some very special stuff planned. That's Saturdays, 4 p.m. Eastern. Put it in your DVR or calendar, and depending on your schedule, maybe you want that catch-up on a Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern. That does it for us.